Kigali, Rwanda was the setting for the first ever Forbes Africa Regional Forum. It followed hot on the heels of the fourth successful Leading Women Summit, taking the essential conversations to East Africa. A variety of talks and panel discussions kept guests in their seats for the full-day event.
I'd like to invite to the podium to formally welcome you to today's event, the Managing Director of Africa Business News, Roberta Naika.
Roberta Naika is Managing Director for Africa Business News. She joined the ABN Group in February 2008 as Head of Finance. In August 2018, Roberta was awarded the Top Businesswoman of the Year award at the Standard Bank Top Women Award.
At the ABN Group, we have a strong value system where equality is a given. In our world, responsibility is shared based on our contribution and inherent strength, and not on gender. With this belief, we have walked the talk on diversity. It is a living value that when your seat is at the table, it is because of what you bring to the party. In absolute terms, what this means is that 60% of our staff are women, 65% of our senior leadership are women, and 40% of our board are women. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I take this opportunity to welcome you all and to congratulate you on being a woman living in this era. It's an amazing time to be alive, and we need to ensure that you lead your best life ever. I thank you all for being here today and for being part of this wonderful initiative. Let's enjoy the day. Thank you.
Salah Goss is the Vice President and Head of Lab for Financial Inclusion at MasterCard. Salah has been with MasterCard for almost 5 years and has extensive experience in the financial inclusion area. She is a member of the Global Aspen Fellowship Network.
We believe that when you elevate decency and inclusiveness above all, you create an environment where the best people can thrive. So it makes sense that women in leadership is a priority for our leadership. This remains an area of focus in how we identify, develop, and prepare women for senior leadership roles. 25% of our company's board of directors are female. And while there's some more work to be done, we're making good progress in the percent of women holding senior positions at MasterCard at our company. We've created a global female leadership development program to identify our next generation of leadership talent, and ensure that these women have the opportunity to develop the necessary skills to take on broader roles within the organization. We have something called the Women's Leadership Network, one of 9 business resource groups with 31 chapters, I'm happy to say, around the world. The one in East Africa is alive and well. And this supports the growth and development of over 3,000 employees globally. In recruiting, 80% of our global candidate slate includes at least one female candidate, resulting in women being 42% of our global hires, and over 50% of our university hires are female. So let me just end by saying it's been an absolute pleasure to be here today, to spend time with you talking about women's empowerment. No one and not one of us can tackle such a critical challenge alone. Women have a rich history of working together and a rich history of collective action. It's my hope that we can harness our collective assets to continue to unleash the power of the female economy and to make sure our voices are not only heard, but that they resonate, that they reverberate, and they carve out a society where women leading is not a novelty to be celebrated, but an imperative. Thank you.
Renuka Methil is the managing editor of the award-winning Forbes Africa and Forbes Woman Africa titles, both Pan-African brands of the African Business News Group. In January this year, she was awarded the Global Women Super Achiever Award by World HRD Congress.
A land of 1,000 rolling hills, verdant valleys, and a vibrant and thriving, innovative population taking Africa to the future. A land that celebrates and reveres its women. A land that occupies one of the top positions in the world for gender parity. A land that also occupies the highest position in the world when it comes to female representation in parliament. Where else but here, in Rwanda, this beautiful, immaculate setting to host the first ever Forbes Africa Regional Forum. And that is what we need to do in this room today. We need to encourage each other. We need to do this for each other and then for those beyond this room as well. As leaders on the front lines of progress, how will you use your agency to create like-minded communities for a better tomorrow? Whose lives are you going to touch today? Hence, the aim of this forum is to serve as a connector. It is about tapping into potential ideas and networks and redefining power.
A businesswoman propelling African fashion into international markets, Dr. Precious Moloi Motsepe established African Fashion International to facilitate the development and success of African lifestyle brands. With a background in medicine specializing in women's health, she has since broadened her efforts to positively impact women's lives. Dr. Precious will be interviewed by the award-winning financial journalist and acclaimed moderator, Nozipho Mbanjwa.
The process of empowerment and the process of making sure that women are not lost in the leadership pipeline needs both men and women. So I want to come back, I want to come to that point for a moment and say, in the conversations, whether it's World Economic Forum or Harvard or any of the really influential seats that you occupy, are we hearing men taking up the mantle and saying, we are going to be part of the solution? This is a humanity issue, and it's not just a woman's issue.
Well, that's a very important and pertinent question, because it's fantastic that we have this event that brings women together and we can network and share and learn from each other. But without the voice of men in the room, we might just be talking to each other. And 20 years down the line, we will still be talking to each other. But I'm very encouraged by some of the leaders that we see. Again, I have to go to President Kagame.
Yeah.
His leadership has ensured that women in this country are represented in politics, in business, so that is a man who truly believes that you cannot build a country with just half the population of the country. You need all the skills and the talent. If you look at my President Ramaphosa, he's also passed laws that will enable women now to be seated at the table, make decisions, and lead. Prime Minister, is it Trudeau from Canada, also does the same. So there are pockets of men who really drive the women's agenda, but we need to see more. And we need to see more women also pushing the women's agenda. I'm really proud of what President Ellen Sirleaf also did for women. There's many women around the world who are also carrying the baton for women. But I'll have to say to you again, that's not enough. When the World Economic Forum tells us it will take us 100 years, actually it's more than 100 years, for us to start to see the change that we seek, for us to see women becoming equal to men, and that's too long.
We don't have 100 years.
We don't.
In the Spotlight became one of the most popular segments of the Forbes Africa Leading Women Summit. So much so that they brought it to the Forbes Africa Regional Forum. This segment is made up of moving accounts, one after the other, from fascinating women on the most important and life-changing chapters of their lives.
It was a sunny afternoon of September 2011 when I went for a run on a football pitch at school and suddenly heard a male voice calling, Inshuti. That means friend in Kinyarwanda. So when I looked back, there was a tall man standing there dressed in a blue tracksuit and holding a tiny red ball. So our school cricket team had hosted a national coach who mistook me for one of the cricket players because at the time I was jogging, they were using the same field for their training. So he was very furious and thought that I was one of the, cool girls who don't want to train with others, and handed over the red ball and told me to kindly join the rest of the team and not to behave like that again. Trust me, that's exactly what I did. Because the last thing I wanted, it is to upset a 6-foot man with a very, very serious face. So I went in for a bowling session. I tried the first ball. Oh, it felt a bit natural. And I led to the second ball, which led to the third ball. And before I knew it, I had joined the school team. Now that was my first experience for love at first sight. Oh yeah, mine was cricket. The whole experience made me develop my leadership skills even more. That in a couple of years ahead, I got elected as the youngest and the first female Secretary General of the Executive Board of Rwanda Cricket Association. I was just 24. And hey, it's not as easy, it wasn't as easy as it sounds right now as I'm speaking, because I had to work twice as much as my male counterparts just to get my efforts recognized out there.
I always dreamt of being a neurosurgeon. And then something strange happened. On a perfectly ordinary morning in medical school, a patient came who would haunt me, not for months, for years, and still haunts me to this very day. Her name, Joyce. I was in 4th year medical school, and I was just getting used to examining patients. But I can still see Joyce then as she was now. Joyce walked into the room, the consultation room, wearing a long faded skirt, a bulky, colorful wool sweater, which was odd for what would have been a warm summer morning in Nairobi. She looked uneasy, and as she sat down, I could see her wincing in pain. And I wondered, the slight stench I detected from her, did it have anything to do with it? And so, she began telling her story. And as she went on, she crossed her arms. And I looked at her closely, wondering, could this be a case of macromastia, abnormally large breasts, which even cause difficulty in breathing? But as she continued with her story, I realized it's something much more sinister. This is very well and could very well be late-stage breast cancer. And I took her through the various options. And Joyce just sat there, listened to me, then finally looked up and said, Doctor, what about my children? Joyce was taking care not of her children, but of her grandchildren. Her daughter had passed away, HIV and AIDS. The husband, of course, grew wings and flew away. She was left with 3 young grandchildren she had to take care of. And just in the same way, I was thinking to myself, yes, I might be working in a public health facility where ideally medical services should be free. There will be a bill nevertheless. And Joyce was probably asking, will I pay my hospital bill or will I feed my grandchildren? She never did come back to us at the teaching and referral hospital. In that same year, I decided not to be a neurosurgeon. I decided to be a healthcare entrepreneur because I wanted to be the change that I want to see in this world.
There is so much suffering in our world, but it took me 3 near-death experiences to see myself as a sufferer as well, and then as somebody who can stop suffering, but also to see myself as the role model that I needed to be. In 2011, I was just about done with high school. I was 17 at the time, ready to go to university. I had a scholarship. I just got in my visa. And then I went home. So you see, I've never been sick as a kid. Never had an infection, never had malaria. But my immune system, suddenly at 17, wanted to show just how mighty and powerful it was. So there I sat and suddenly started feeling weak. I couldn't breathe. And I actually remember going to my room wondering, oh, what is happening? And then I realized I'm actually losing my breath. I'm dying. And I closed my eyes thinking, what's next? What's coming? But in that moment, I just wondered, what am I going to be remembered at? I knew I was a rebel. That was established, but no cause yet. I knew my parents were proud of me. I knew having a scholarship, having the famous US visa, my life had a whole different path. If you asked me what I wanted to be before I had that experience, I knew I wanted to be the first woman, African woman, to Mars, to the moon and then to Mars. It started with the moon and then Mars. But I realized that takes time. Most astronauts are really old, and suddenly, after that experience, I knew I may not have enough time. I realized that death can happen just any time. And you have to do something. I realized, although it's funny, I realized my life, with all the achievements, with all the talent I was blessed with, had kind of ended up with that high note. I did wake up, that's why I'm here, but turned up, it was the first of many symptoms, but after a lot of antihistamine and steroids, my body woke up, and I went on with life, never thinking too much about that night. So in that moment again, my 3rd near-death experience, I realized I couldn't stay small. I couldn't be scared to be discovered, like many people have said before. Just a message for every lady in the room. There is so much suffering in this world again, as I started. And we all can address this in a small way, but we can also address it in a big way. And we shouldn't be scared to step out and address it in a big way. Don't just provide a water point in the center of the community. Go the extra mile and provide women with piped water in their homes. Don't do it for one village. Aim to do it for the whole of Africa, for all women in the whole world.
It's quite interesting for me how my story will be going. I look happy outside, but inside I'm more nervous than anyone seated there. Here my story goes. I'm a girl who has been affected and afflicted by the world. I've been knocked and struck down every second of my life. I lived with questions, I lived with no answers. I knocked and stamped myself on the wall asking for a way through. I tried to believe in stories I read in books, thinking that one day my story will also come up the same. Everybody dreams of being a princess, but not knowing how to act like a princess. In my own small world, my great-grandmother told me that you're a very, very good princess if you believe that that day will come. I lived in a world whereby everything was a nightmare for me. Everything around me became a clock. Every second, every minute, and every hour stopped. My heart, my life, my dreams, my parents, and everything around me disappeared. I lived as an individual. A time came when my great-grandmother told me that, Patricia, the way to survive in Uganda is only for you to become a woman. It doesn't matter the age. So I asked her, and I'm like, but I am still just 10 years old. She said, yes, I was a woman before I was even 10 years old, so you can be the same. But what impressed me was what my great-grandmother told me, that girls, stay at school and learn to write your own name. In the future, you'll write many things. So today, as I'm speaking to you, in Uganda, a very small country, talk about Europe, talk about maybe here also in Rwanda, has been nominated just to be in Forbes Africa. That has given me a name, a greater name. I don't only have a name in that. I am African kickboxing champion. I'm very, very proud to say I am a world kickboxing champion. And my name is Apollo Patricia, and I'm proud to be an African woman.
Nelly Mukazayire is the CEO of the Rwanda Convention Bureau. Prior to that, she was the Deputy Chief of Staff in the Office of the President of Rwanda. She also served as a Senior Advisor to the Chief of Staff and as Policy Researcher in the Prime Minister's Office. Yvonne Manzimakolo was appointed Rwandair's CEO on the 6th of April 2018. She joined Rwandair in April 2017 as the Deputy CEO in charge of corporate affairs. Previously, she worked with MTN Rwanda as the Chief Marketing Officer and briefly as the acting CEO. Salah Goss is the Vice President and Head of Lab for Financial Inclusion at MasterCard. Salah has been with MasterCard for almost 5 years and has extensive experience in the financial inclusion area. She is a member of the Global Aspen Fellowship Network. The moderator is Nozipo Mbanjwa.
For those who have an accounting background, you'll remember this. Substance over form, right? Our form is that we are women. But what is the substance that you're bringing to the table? Because that's the thing that gets you heard. Yvonne, you raised something very, very interesting towards the tail end of your first response. You spoke about having to do it all and still be a mother and still have a family. So I want to bring that part into the conversation in. Are we doing enough as women to educate the world that we need to rethink about what we've been framing as the role of women, because we do have multiple roles?
I think a lot more needs to be done. And first, it has to start with us women believing that we can do it all, both taking care of the kids and the family, and also doing our jobs and doing it very well. But also realizing for women, as us women, we have to realize that we can't do it by ourselves. So you have to set up your support system. your support system at work and your support system outside of work. Because if you try and do it all, there's no way it will work. So on my side, I surround myself with people who know a lot more than I do, especially at work, and who I can learn from on a regular basis. I have people I reach out to when I don't understand something that I need feedback on. But at home as well, I have my family, my extended family, who can watch the kids when I travel, because I travel a lot, and because we tend to feel very guilty. You're at work, you feel guilty that you're not with the kids, and you need to spend time with the kids. When you're with the kids, you feel guilty. You're like, maybe I should be at work and taking care of this. So it's, in the end, you drive yourself crazy. So it needs to start with us. Realizing that we can do both and do it well, but also we need help, that support system to help us.
It's often said that we have a higher probability of becoming that which we can see. So almost as women in leadership, you have to role model those decisions. The decision that I choose to leave to go and pick up my children right now. So Nelia, you've got your own comment on this. I'll come to you next. So Sala, very quickly, are you role modeling?
Technology, we can all agree, is pretty male dominated. I think also in corporate settings, although we're in a setting in a country that has fantastic statistics, in the US and other places, not so much so. And I think to be able to role model, so maybe I'll leave it to my staff to say if I am or not, but to be able to, it comes back to this word I always come back to, is authenticity. And having the courage to exemplify that leadership looks different. So it might not be FaceTime, coming in and being the last one to leave. It might be remote work.
Yeah.
It might be being empathetic and letting staff have different kind of arrangements in terms of what they want to do. But in order to be able to lead from a place of empathy, to realize what people really want to role model it, you have to have confidence.
Yeah.
It's not just age, it's not just gender. There's always a reason why you're other or different or in the minority, and sometimes we look at that as a negative. But I think what's helped me is that's positive. No one has the voice that I have, and no one sees things the way that I do.
Yeah.
And so in a position of leadership, if you have vision and execution, you get respect, and you start to have more and more confidence of doing things that you know might look a little different, but will achieve something at the end. And so being able to model that, it's getting comfortable with that model, but I think what's more important is having the courage to be authentic, and that model looks different than a man, and that's not only okay, but that actually might be a benefit.
You know, most of the time the question that comes is when we're in this corporate world, busy, and we do not have time with family. But I ask myself, even, how do we qualify that time? Is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a few hours? So when you say you need to spend time with the family, with the kids, how do we frame that? And what I've learned is that the definition should not be more of how many hours, but the quality of the time I've spent with my kids or my husband or my family. And when you start understanding that way, the guilt issue I was talking about goes away, because it's more of the impact, it's more of the quality. It can't be just 1 hour a week, but how much have I been connecting
and
with them and impacting them? Because at the end of the day, it's not just sitting and looking at them, it's what are you transferring into them in terms of who they are going to become. So I just wanted to mention that, because many times women, that thing comes, I didn't get enough time, I didn't spend a weekend with the kids. But is it about just time, hours, or it's about more of the quality?
Into kicking off our second half with a short but very insightful one-on-one conversation with the CEO of the Rwanda Development Board, and of course our lovely moderator Nozipo back on stage.
Thank you very much, Makeda. We're going to switch things up a little bit, and instead of sitting down, we're going to grab your attention, because we're actually going to have a chat right here in the center of stage. Right? So ladies and gentlemen, a very big privilege for us to have a conversation with Dr. Claire Akamanzi. Claire, when one thinks about women at the pinnacle of leadership, women who are sitting on multiple boards, women that are giving strategic direction to the future and the present as well, your name comes up over and over again. What is your sense of whether executives, boards, governments are really taking the issue of women empowerment seriously and are seeing it as a strategic intent and something that is absolutely important for humanity?
Yeah, thank you, Nozipo, and good afternoon, everyone. It's very good to see many faces that I know of phenomenal women. So very nice time sharing with you what I can share with you. Now, on the question of whether we're doing enough to include women, I think that, first of all, including women in leadership positions, whether it's boards or management levels, needs to be a very deliberate effort. I think we need champions who can actually see and look for these women and give them the opportunity. Of course, women can be competitive, but when it comes to the history of, or the gaps that we have to fill, I think there's a little bit more deliberate work that needs to be done. And I think we can learn from Rwanda's political leadership. Our president tells us stories that when they give him a list of appointments, he always says, but where are the women?
Yeah.
If he didn't ask that question, perhaps the women would not be as many as they are in leadership positions. So whether you're a CEO, chairman of the board, or if you're in a position of being that champion, you need to be deliberate about asking where are the women. And the president has also told us stories of when people come to him and say, we failed to get women. We don't have enough women to propose to you. And he says, okay, go back, do your homework. When you get the women, then we shall fill those positions. And when you really work hard to find those women, you actually find them.
Yeah.
And so I feel that there's a little bit more deliberate efforts, especially in the private sector, to do the same. Do we have managers in banks saying, before I get another C-level or senior manager, I need 3 more women, and it's deliberate. And if you really make it deliberate, you find it. So I think there's room, especially in the private sector, to do more deliberate searching for these women.
Esther Mbabazi is a pilot for Rwanda's national airline, Rwandair. She was the first female in Rwanda to be certified as a commercial airline pilot. She trained at the East African Civil Aviation Academy in Uganda.
When they first told me to talk about power at 30,000 feet, it started me thinking, is it because of the female voice on the public address? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. From the flight deck, is that power? Or is it that I fly a machine that carries about 300 people, that weighs almost 240,000 kilograms? Or is it in overcoming the phobia of flight in over 90% of the population in the world? Or is it simply sipping coffee at 30,000 feet in my fabulous office and saying, wow, this is power? So I thought of all of those things. But in my opinion, it's really none of the above. Once you make the first step, you have to trust that the other 1,000 steps will sort themselves out, right? So, the rest of my story was pretty easy because after my private pilot's license, I joined a cadet group and went to the US, did the rest commercial license, instrument rating, and type ratings. And the rest of my story is fabulous. Flying, I flew a CRJ 900. I'm currently flying an Airbus 330. And basically, my story is amazing. And I've had the pleasure of flying with a lot of other women like me. And we are what we are, women. That's it. And sometimes people try to differentiate us from other women, saying you must be like a man in a way, or you have to have a backbone of steel, you have to be extremely strong, or for some reason you have to be, there is a term called tomboy, you have to be some sort of boy. And so for some people it's an easy explanation as that. It's like, oh, she's like a boy, so she can do it. in a way to discourage other young girls from kind of joining. So sometimes it's nice to bulk in the glory and say, oh, I'm like a man, and I'm doing this, I'm the man. But at the end of the day, I am just a woman who is living my dream, and I'm flying planes. This is power at 30,000 feet. It is simply doing a regular job, but being a woman and doing it normally. Thank you.
Tanya Habimana is the CEO of Non-Zero Africa, an integrated marketing company with a focus on creating impact programs and enterprise development campaigns in Africa. She is a Rwandan entrepreneur with a passion for digital innovation and SME development in Africa. Charlene Nafula is the founder and CEO of Crystal River Products, a Kenyan manufacturing company for bio-based beauty and hygiene products. She is a multiple award-winning businesswoman. Nomvula Mambi is an award-winning Zimbabwean businesswoman dedicated to creating sustainable solutions to the problems facing urban communities in Zimbabwe. She is the founder and operations manager of Disruptive Innovation. Vivian Onano is a social entrepreneur and seasoned humanitarian who is recognized as an emerging woman leader with the courage to lead change on the African continent. She is a youth advisor to Global Education Monitoring Report, UNESCO, and the founder director at Leading Light Initiative. The moderator is Alexander Liebner, head of ABN Event Productions.
What is it like starting and running a business as a young female entrepreneur in Africa?
Wow. That's a big question.
Ah.
What is it like? I want to say, and I think that has to do with who I am as a person and how I've kind of led my life. The fact that I'm young, that I'm a woman, that I'm African, and in, let's say, in a South African context, because my business is in South Africa, Black African. I've always seen these things as an advantage. I've always seen it as a way to stand out and to not be a part of the crowd, and I use it in all that I do. And so for me, it's actually a very exciting and empowering thing to be, and an empowering time to be at.
Fantastic. And Mvula, let's move down the line here as we tackle this question.
I think for me, it's always the element of surprise when you walk into a room and it's mostly male-dominated. And they're sort of expecting someone else to be following behind you. And actually, you have to sort of stop and say, no, but wait a minute. I'm the founder of this business, It stops here. And for them, it's always a shock of, oh, number one, you're young and you're a female. So I always find that being able to break boundaries has been always one of the biggest advantages that have led the path for me. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Let's move down.
I'd say it's exciting as well as it is tough. Most African parents still question, why aren't you looking for a job, especially when you're just starting out? Later on, it's when they come to appreciate your idea of being an entrepreneur and creating other jobs, not just looking for a job.
And Vivian?
I think, going back to what Tanya said, it's an exciting time to be a young person. It's an exciting time to be a young African woman. But again, there are stereotypes that come with being a young African woman running a business. I'm a social entrepreneur, so I get to deal with both business people and politicians. And I think most of the time, when they read my bio, they think I'm a certain age. When I come into the room, they realize that the age that they had sort of stuck to my name is different, right? So then they're like, okay, what is she bringing to the table? What does she know? And now you have to rise to the plate. And I think that is a story that I may share with many on this panel, but also many other young people that I've met across the continent and I've worked with too.
As we are speaking about women and companies making us proud, our next speaker represents one of the most significant companies in East Africa. Please welcome to the stage Fatima Duji, author and director of marketing at the METL Group Tanzania, with her talk, How to Market Yourself Effectively in the Digital Era.
In order to capture different audiences, I make sure to post my content on various social media platforms. After years of providing valuable content, I now have the credibility to hold seminars and workshops on helping people market their business better. I've been able to sell my own merchandise and soon hope to launch my own fashion line. Most significantly, however, social media has given me the opportunity to touch a large group of people and make a difference. I've had the opportunity to share content that cover motivational messages of gratitude, self-worth, and emotional resilience. Through the comment section, my followers have the opportunity to open up and interact with me and each other. It was October 11th, 2018, that I truly discovered the power of social media. I got a frantic phone call at 6:30 a.m. from a family member telling me that my brother had been kidnapped. Our life had come to a standstill. For 9 days and 9 nights, the entire nation was in a state of despair. It was a single tweet that started with the hashtag #BringBackMo that resulted in 1 million retweets from all around the world. It was this that kept my family going. It was this sense of connection and humanity that kept our hopes up during desperate times. Social media only has power when you are authentic, when you're genuine and you truly care. So whether it's for your business or your personal brand, remember, people can and will see right through you. I'd like to end with a small passage from my book that I think will bring all this in focus. So, when does the magic happen? The magic of success. I believe it happens when you start to believe in yourself, when you start to value who you are, when you understand that your voice matters and your actions matter. That's the first spark of magic. Then the actual burst of magic happens when you begin to understand that it's not all about you, that it's really about finding a purpose that is bigger than just you. That means serving others, helping others overcome a particular problem, helping others achieve a specific dream. That's what I want to do. Thank you so much.
Marlet Afterwork is an award-winning fashion designer and founder of fashion house Mafi Mafi. She places ancient fabric, style and sustainability at the fore of her brand. She has garnered attention and plaudits from the global community. Teta Isibo is a Rwandan fashion entrepreneur and the founder of Inzuku Designs, a Rwandan brand specializing in jewelry, home decor and accessories that fuses Rwandan traditional craftsmanship and global contemporary design. Linda Ndungutsi Mukongoga is the founder and creative director of the Made in Rwanda brand, Haute Basso, which highlights local artisans while promoting job creation, particularly for youth and women. Annette Uweziye is the managing director of AWise Media, as well as a creative producer with a vision of accelerating the production of quality African film, TV and video content, especially in the areas of culture, history and nature. The moderator for this panel is our MC, Makeda Mahadio.
It really does feel like, and the numbers are backing it up, that this is the generation in which more and more women are emerging as leaders in the creative industries, especially in East Africa. You know, Annette, not enough women are producing their own films, owning their own production houses, and even in the fashion industry, even though women have been, weaving, dyeing, making materials for clothing for ever. It's now that we're seeing more and more women owning their own fashion brands, owning their own corporatives and making that impact. What do you think that it is about this generation that is encouraging more women to get to the helm? Let's start with Teta. You're right beside me.
First of all, I called Deeps to sit in that chair, but anyways.
No one listened to
So I will talk from my experience as a designer. So the design subsector. I think you are right. Definitely, there's this whole upcoming movement of women entrepreneurs in the creative economies. I think in my sector in particular, it's due to a number of reasons. First of all, consumers today are very socially conscious. People want to know where their clothes, their jewelry, where it's coming from. You have movements like "Who made my clothes?" the hashtag and stuff like that. And then if you combine that with the fact that there's a buzz around handmade products, because again they give that human feel. You know that your product wasn't made in a sweatshop somewhere in China or Bangladesh, and that's why you have online marketplaces like Etsy doing very well because it's just for handcrafted products. And actually, I think on Etsy, 87% of their 2 million sellers are women. So that alone shows the women dominance in this sector. And then also, culturally and traditionally, women have always been like the makers of things, the weaving and the embroidery and all that. So if you couple all that up with the fact that international trade is also very women-centered these days, because for the longest time women were left behind, but now we're moving forward in everything. So I think if you put all that together, the odds are in our favor, and so it's a good time to be a woman.
Right, a question of ethics and a combination of things. Malet, do you agree?
Definitely. Yeah, I totally agree with her, but at the same time, it's quite hard for me to answer it in a women perspective, because I think if we see the fashion industry, the leading designers in the world are men, but in East Africa it happens to be, especially if I talk about Ethiopia, most of the fashion designers and leading the industry, the creative industry, the music, film, the actresses, the TV presenters happen to be women. Maybe we happen to be, powerful or leaders.
Right.
But also, if we take it in the government level, the Ethiopian government, especially the new regime, we have a very exciting young prime minister now, and we also have a woman president, and 50% of the cabinet are women. So I think overall in Ethiopia, one in creative industry and also in a lot of industries, we happen to see a lot of young, amazing women entrepreneurs, and that inspires us as a woman and also young
right.
entrepreneurs. And so we're seeing, even now we're seeing more dynamic young entrepreneurs coming and changing the industry.
I really do want to come back to that topic of, the creative industry in Ethiopia. The other women on the panel are from here in Rwanda, but I do want to talk about Ethiopia opening up a lot more now. We're seeing it a lot in news, especially business news. The economy is opening up. And as a player in the creative industry, how are you planning to take advantage of that opening up of the country?
Still kind of tricky question for me, because I'm a fan of locally made businesses. So I don't want to see, honestly speaking, I don't like to see, like all big, American chains coming to my country and, taking over all the businesses and jobs. So I rather want to see more African businesses striving and, creating our own Ubers. So for instance, in Ethiopia, you don't see a lot of big chance, but you see locally made amazing coffee shops, amazing, clothing brands.
Right.
And also we have like an Uber still created by a woman entrepreneur in Ethiopia. So we don't use Uber, but we have an effective product very similar to that.
Sure,
which
taking that
holds-
ownership.
Exactly. So that's how I see it.
No, absolutely. Are there any, in Ethiopia, there are many women entrepreneurs, but I want to ask this to everyone on the panel. Are there any cultural stereotypes that you have felt that you had to transcend in your professional life, especially being a creative entrepreneur? Let's talk to Linda.
I think we're in a good space in Rwanda. Every time someone asks me about the trajectory of Haute Basso, I wouldn't see it in any other country because you have a lot of good examples of leadership, women in leadership. So it lets you be comfortable in seeing yourself in that same position. So I think that's a big push as to why we're here, but also fosters a lot of female empowerment when you're in those positions. So being acknowledged in meetings, being called on for opportunities. So I think that is part of our success story. So for me, I think we're in a lucky space right now, so I hope to see more countries create that kind of environment that fosters more female leadership and female entrepreneurship.
Right. I know that also, we're talking about creative industries, but it's quite wide, the different categories that are in there. I know for me, when I was starting DJing back in the days, and I was among the first female DJs in Rwanda, I did face some stereotypes that were being placed on me. A lot of times people would say, but you're a nice girl. Why do you have to, what about getting married? And I'm not sure if that's something that any of the other ladies have faced. Annette, in your industry, I've also been in production, and there's a lot more men than women in that space. Have you faced any cultural stereotypes?
I've faced cultural stereotypes, but also surprised by myself that how much of that cultural stereotype I've embraced or self-imposed. And so it's one thing for the environment to be conducive for women now, but it's another thing for us to deal with what's within us and just start shedding that off. So I remember earlier on in my career having to be in a room full of men, powerful men, and women, some women, and having to state an opinion or a point, and culturally, just being surprised that within me there's just a code somewhere or protocol that says, in Kinyarwanda there's ways, expressions you can use, but that you're supposed to be proper, not too outspoken, and you can't have that in business when you're leading, when you need to negotiate in rooms like those. So that was something that I realized quickly I needed to work through, both from the outside and from the inside.
Right. Annette, with production, and I'm asking you this because the other ladies on the panel are making products, but with production, it's a bit newer than the other art forms that we're talking about on the stage today. With Mafi Mafi, with Inzuki and Haute Basso, you can see the cultural influence in the work. You can see the traditional techniques being used, some patterns, you can see the influence there. With filmmaking, it's a newer art form for the region. You're kind of creating the culture in that regard as one of the, being among the first female producers to be making such an impact. Do you feel the pressure?
Yes and no. The pressure that it's new, I'd say it's more of a pressure of still working in a business environment in general, and having to deal with the usual operations, because in the end of the day, when it comes to film as a craft, you're still running a business entity in a way that you're hiring people, you're working with writers, you're making sure you're meeting, say, deadlines, whether it's an independent work or it's a client job. So maybe I'd say not so much.
The day was rounded off with a stunning fashion show by African Fashion International, featuring 4 African designers.